All right, today we're diving into a timeless fable, one that holds a seriously sharp lesson for our modern world. It's a story all about a simple trip to the market that, believe it or not, turns into a masterclass on the dangers of listening to absolutely everyone.
So let's start with a big question just to get us thinking. When you're on a mission, whether it's a big project or just, living your life, whose opinion really matters the most? Just keep that question in the back of your mind as we go through this.
Because you see, the story we're about to unpack is all about a guy who tries his absolute best to make every single person he meets happy. I mean, he really thinks he's doing the right thing, just being agreeable. And what happens? In his desperate attempt to win everybody over, he doesn't just fail to please anyone, he ends up losing the one thing that actually mattered. Okay, so let's get into the story itself. The scene is super simple. You've got an old miller and his son, and they're walking their donkey to the market. They're planning to sell it, right? So to make sure the animal is in tip-top shape for the sale, they are just walking alongside it.
So pretty soon, they pass a group of travelers. And these people just burst out laughing. They start mocking them like, "What are you fools doing, walking when one of you could be riding?" And the miller, he doesn't want to look foolish, so he immediately tells his son, "Okay, you get on the donkey."
Okay, but a little further down the road, they run into three merchants. And these guys are outraged. They start scolding the son, saying, "Have some respect for your elders, young man. Get down and let your old father ride." So to please them, the miller and his son switch places. But that doesn't work either. Of course not. At the next turn, a group of women see them and start criticizing the miller. "Look at that lazy old fool," they say, "making his poor son walk." So the miller, frustrated but still trying to do the right thing, tells the boy to just climb up and ride behind him. So now they're both on the donkey. And yeah, you can probably guess what happens next. Another group sees them and starts shouting that it's just plain animal cruelty. They're jeering, yelling that the two of them look more capable of carrying the poor donkey than it is of carrying them. And in what has to be the absolute peak of this madness, that is exactly what they do. They get off the donkey, tie its legs to a big pole, and hoist the poor animal onto their shoulders to carry it. I'm not kidding. So they're crossing a bridge like this, and the crowd is just roaring with laughter. All that noise terrifies the animal. It starts to struggle, the ropes snap, and the donkey falls into the river and drowns. And just like that, the miller is left with nothing. He tried to please everybody, and in the end, he pleased nobody and lost everything he had. So let's take a step back and really dissect this failure. Because this story isn't just about a silly old man, right? It's a brilliant breakdown of how a totally sincere attempt to listen to everyone can lead you straight to ruin. See, each character here is really an archetype. The miller, he's the classic people pleaser, a person whose own internal compass is completely broken. The son represents malleable youth, learning the dangerous lesson that you should just bend to whoever is yelling the loudest. And the donkey? The donkey is the goal itself. It's the objective which becomes this useless, heavy burden the moment you try to handle it without any conviction. This whole story perfectly illustrates what we can call the paradox of universal approval. Think about it. The more you try to please absolutely everyone, the more ridiculous and ineffective you actually become. The miller's fatal flaw wasn't that he was mean or unkind, it was that he had no core intent. He had a simple goal, sell the donkey, but he let the random, totally contradictory opinions of strangers dictate his every single move. So you might be sitting there thinking, okay, that's an ancient fable. How in the world does this apply to my life today? Well, the truth is, and this is the important part, we are all the miller sometimes. So let's really turn this inward for a second. Ask yourself this. What ass are you currently carrying on a pole? What goal, what project, what part of your own life are you making absurdly difficult simply because you're afraid of what some random person on the street might say or think? This kind of folly tends to show up in three main ways. First, on a personal level. It's when we change who we are based on every single critical comment. Second, interpersonally. It's when you agree with all sides in a conflict, trying to be the peacemaker, but you end up being trusted by no one. And third, professionally. This is when a project or a product gets altered based on all the feedback until the original vision is just completely lost. So how do we avoid this trap? I mean, what's the solution? Well, the great thing about this story is that it doesn't just diagnose the problem, it also points toward the cure, which is all about finding your conviction and learning to stay in the saddle. So here are the key lessons to really internalize. First, the fool isn't the person being laughed at. The fool is anyone who stops their journey to argue with a spectator. Second, stop asking for directions from people who aren't going where you are. Think about that. And third, agreement is the absolute heaviest load anyone can try to carry. And you know what? That donkey would have been a whole lot safer if the miller had just been a little more stubborn.
And to help with this, here are 4 really powerful mantras you can use to kind of lock this idea in. I am the master of my own journey. I value my own conviction above the crowd's approval. I move toward my goals with a steady and undivided heart. And I do not carry the weight of other people's expectations. It's all about taking ownership.
And that brings us to the final, most important takeaway. In the end, it is so much better to be laughed at for your methods than to be pitied for your losses. So let them laugh. Because being mocked for how you choose to get to your destination is infinitely better than being pitied because you showed up with nothing, having lost it all along the way.